I think this is a reality check for every government on the planet. Wake up, get ready.
The continued increase in the number of cases are clearly of concern.
COVID-19 is now in nearly 60 countries with 85,000 cases around the world. The widening outbreak is sending stock markets into a free fall. There are now 2 more coronavirus patients in Canada, first in Quebec and a new one here in Toronto. We'll have more on that in a minute. But with the number of infections around the world still steadily rising, today the World Health Organization issued a new warning and raised its level of alarm.
And we have now increased our assessment of the risk of spread and the risk of impact of COVID-19 to very high at global level.
Nigeria, Mexico, Lithuania, Belarus, the Netherlands, and New Zealand all announcing their first cases today. And for the first time, South Korea's number of new infections surpassed China's. In fact, China reported its lowest number of new cases in a 24-hour period. Much of the spread around the world now is being traced back to outbreak zones in Italy and Iran. The WHO says nations must prepare for further spread now and adopt aggressive containment measures before it's too late to prevent a pandemic. While the WHO is calling on countries to prepare, each nation's capacity to do so varies widely, and it's not just developing countries that are struggling. Health reporter Christine Burak takes a look at what factors are at play and who is the most vulnerable.
No one knows exactly how this coronavirus might take off in different nations around the globe, but experts say there are indicators.
When we look at what countries are most vulnerable, it's clear that it's those countries that have the weaker public health systems in place.
To his point, compare what's happening in Singapore versus Iran. Despite its ties and close proximity to China, Singapore is reporting far fewer cases than Iran. Experts say the strength of Singapore's healthcare system has allowed it to react quickly. Containing a virus requires early detection, isolation and treatment of sick patients, and tracing contacts who may also be infected.
So there's several countries in Africa that don't have that ability to test. There may be cases already, and if you don't have that ability to test, it becomes really hard to respond to it.
The World Health Organization has identified 13 vulnerable African countries, including the Democratic Republic of Congo and Algeria. Airports on the continent are screening passengers and lab tests are arriving. But some of those nations are dealing with Ebola, measles, and other outbreaks. An influx of COVID-19 patients, especially severe cases, could overwhelm hospitals. But experts say the SARS virus did not take hold in Africa, and COVID-19 may not either.
We've seen a few cases here and there, but we're not seeing the widespread transmission that I think we were all concerned would happen.
There's also cautious optimism about South America. Scientists don't know if warmer climates play a role, but countries with younger populations will likely see fewer illnesses. Data so far shows COVID-19 is hitting people over 60 hard, and that could take a toll on developed countries.
The U.S. right now, I think, is our big concern. And the primary reason why I say that is the debate about how they're able to do diagnostic testing at this point.
Unlike here in Canada, the U.S. has not been widely testing sick patients. Some fear it's missing infected COVID-19 patients and might not be able to contain the virus. Ultimately, no one knows how this outbreak will evolve. With a vaccine at least a year away and no proven antivirals yet, citizens and public healthcare systems worldwide should be prepared for the worst. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
Fears of the coronavirus have hit the markets hard. Global stock sell-offs continued for the 6th day in a row, but markets clawed back some of its losses in the last 15 minutes of trading. Let's start here in Toronto with the TSX for the day down 454 points. And in New York, the Dow Jones swung back from an early slide of more than 1,000 points and ended up down about 357 points. This week was Bay Street and Wall Street's worst since the October 2008 global financial crisis. And for some perspective, Microsoft and Apple, the two most valuable companies in the S&P 500, lost a combined $300 billion. Senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong joins us now, and if Peter is here, you know the markets are in trouble.
Not
so,
fair. It's
Peter,
not my fault.
whenever you come on the show, it's to break down the bad news for us. So how bad is all of this, Peter?
Listen, I'm not going to hedge this. This was an ugly week. But, and I say this as something of an optimist, I think there was some glimmers of hope to close out the week. I mean, if you go through Monday to Thursday, the numbers were spectacularly bad, and they were on track to be equally bad again today. But then just in the last few hours of the trading day, we saw some rallying. We saw the NASDAQ actually close in positive territory. We saw the Russell really make a push. I think the Dow climbed something like 400 points in the last hour alone. And all of that coming after the Fed chair, the head of the U.S. Central Bank, the U.S. Federal Reserve, came out and said, whatever tools we have to support the economy, we will use. Largely what he's talking about there is an interest rate cut. There's widespread expectation now that they will not only have one cut at the Fed, but two. So a sense of positive that maybe there is something that can provide some support to this rally, and that maybe the optimists might say that the worst is behind us.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a bit of a clawback towards the end of the day. Not all of us are in the market, in the stock market. Right. What does this mean for regular folks?
Well, listen, it means a lot. And the economy is not the market is not the economy, but it's like a Venn diagram with an awful lot of crossover. So the thing to remember here is we don't really understand what impact the coronavirus is going to have. And if it comes to North America, will we see factories and offices close in the same way we saw them close in China? Will we see, streets empty and sports stadiums go empty like we see right now in parts of Italy? What impact will that have on supply? What impact will that have on demand? What impact will all of those things have on employment and wages and all the things? And the other thing, just to keep in mind in all of this, is since the market crashed in 2008 and began to recover in 2009, it's been the Canadian consumer that really put the economy on its back and marched it up a steep hill. We depend on that Canadian consumer to keep spending, to keep GDP growth going. And if they stay home over fears of the virus, over fears of the economy, that's going to have a negative impact on the economy as well.
Yeah, if you're quarantined, you're not out spending money.
You're not.
All right, can we expect then governments to step in and steady the market if things get really, really bad?
It's a good question, and it comes back to sort of where I began, about the sense of rally came from just a signal, not even a move, but a signal from the Fed that they might be willing to come in and use what tools they have at their discretion. I think there's a lot of questions around that. We don't yet know, but just the sense that the Fed would be willing to say that gave us a lot of signals for hope, a lot of positive movement at the end of the day, and you got to sort of take that and think, well, how does that look going forward? We'll have to wait and see.
If you're back next week, we're going to be worried. Thank you, Peter.
You bet.
Now, as we told you earlier, Ontario recorded another COVID-19 case today, a man in his 50s who recently traveled to Iran. It's the province's 7th case, and it comes as some GTA doctors are sounding the alarm about a medical mask shortage in our city. Farah Morelli joins us live now from Hospital Row on University Avenue. Farah, this has become a real problem for doctors.
It really has, Troy. For weeks we've been hearing about shortages of masks amongst members of the public trying to buy them. Now that's seeped into the medical community. Doctors say they're having trouble even finding basic surgical masks at medical supply stores, and they use these to prevent the transmission of other infections amongst their patients. I spoke to one doctor who said in her 20 years, she's never experienced a shortage like this.
So I'm just walking to my This is one of the last boxes of any masks Dr. Iris Gorfinkel has in her entire office.
This is kind of worth its weight in gold at this point because try as we might, we cannot get this anywhere in the city.
These N95 masks are ones she uses for personal protection, but she's completely out of basic surgical masks, the ones her office hands out to sick patients.
As of 2 weeks ago, we ran out of masks, and it's a terrible thing. So we've got to really be on our toes to try to get those patients in who have infections, and make sure that we're not exposing vulnerable patients to those others.
She's tried for weeks to get more, but nothing.
This is a first, right? We've never ever heard those words from a medical supplier that we cannot give you something as simple as masks.
It's not just medical supply stores that are out, it's everyone else too. We called more than a dozen pharmacies in Toronto and Mississauga today. No one had any, and most didn't even know when they'd be getting more. Part of the problem, people keep buying masks out of fear.
In the general public, there really is no reason for people to be walking around right now in Canada wearing masks to try and protect themselves.
That message has been repeated by health officials, but people, it seems, aren't listening, and they may actually be doing more harm than good.
I think that while people understand at the time, and that can kind of alleviate the fears when they hear, oh, I don't need to wear a mask right now, anytime something is changed, it seems to be getting that fear back up, and they're kind of looking for ways to protect themselves.
As for Dr. Gorfinkel, her office is trying to balance scheduling patients, but it's not easy.
We try to triage them so that we try to have them come in when other patients who may be at risk are not going to be exposed to them. But you know how it is. When you're sick, what do? You go to a doctor's office.
Dwight, I did reach out to Public Health. They directed me to the Ministry of Health on this, and the Ministry of Health did not respond to us about whether this is something that is on their radar. I did manage to speak to the president of the Ontario Medical Association. What he told me is that they have been hearing about some of these shortages, and they're encouraging doctors or other medical professionals to reach out to them, and they can do what they can to step in and provide supplies where they're needed, because this is a problem that's clearly not going away anytime soon, Dwight.
Yeah, possibly getting even bigger. Thank you for that, Farah. You can find the very latest on the coronavirus outbreak online at cbcnews.ca. Okay, this was the scene last night at Buttonville Airport. Fire crews were called to a hangar around 11:30. They arrived to find a Dassault Falcon 50 jet engulfed in flames. Investigators found a hole cut in a nearby chain link fence, fresh tracks in the snow, and an empty jerry can at the base of the jet's stairs.
I have seen some of the overhead shots. It looks like that plane was tucked right back, and it looks like it had been there for quite some time before this incident happened. We do believe this is a criminal incident. We do believe that the fire was intentionally set.
Anyone with information is asked to contact York Regional Police. There is another twist tonight in the saga surrounding the new Ontario license plates. We are learning the Ford government has now halted production of the plates, and starting next week, drivers who need a new one will get the old white ones instead. Our Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has more.
When they unveiled the government's new license plate design last year, Doug Ford's cabinet ministers were all smiles. More than 200,000 of these plates have been produced. Now all of them are headed for recycling.
Look, you can read that one, but what the is that?
The province has halted production of the flawed blue plates, difficult to read in the dark, but will keep handing them out to drivers until next Wednesday.
Knowingly continuing to distribute these problematic plates for another week is not acceptable.
On Thursday, the province will switch to distributing leftover stock of the old white plates, the ones with the Yours to Discover motto. That continues until the fixed version of the new plates becomes available, expected on March 16th. The government says there will be no cost to taxpayers, but for the Progressive Conservatives,
a place to grow.
The license plate saga might mean a political cost.
I think that there are often things that happen that governments don't always do things perfectly, as you know. And when things turn up that are problematic, that you need to say so.
With no other minister available to comment on plates today, reporters questioned the Deputy Premier.
The important thing is to acknowledge it, fix it, and then move on.
71,000 Ontario drivers were issued the blue plates this month. All will get replacements. This is one of the prototype plates the government gave reporters last year when the new design was first unveiled. Senior government officials tell me they do not know whether the replacement plates will retain any of these design features, including the blue background. That was criticized from the start for being the color of the Progressive Conservative Party. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
The province has released its new rules when it comes to selling vapes. Coming up, the regulations and why young people who do vape say that may not be enough to keep it out of their hands.
I think they should be so easily available. You can buy them, at least right now, at like gas stations and convenience stores.
Well, I don't think that's going to change. Like, I think teenagers...
The government's trying to change it.
Well, they're going to change it, but we're always going to find a way to get some kind of vape. Yeah, or, like, I mean, nicotine addiction is severe. Like, we'll find a way to get what we need. You know what I mean?
We will soon learn if the city's outside workers will either go on strike or be locked out. The deadline is midnight tonight. At that point, the 1,000 QP workers could walk off the job. The city will be in a legal lockout position at the same time. The two sides have been in talks since the fall. The labor action would affect garbage pickup, rec centers, animal services, and you could expect some longer lines for parking permits and other administrative services. Windy downtown, call it, snow north of the city.
Yeah, and you put those two together and we get our snow squalls, and we've seen some significant problems on the roadways due to these whiteout conditions. Just have a look. First of all, watches and warnings in place. Blizzard warning still the area in yellow, but snow squall warning, that's what I want to really draw your attention to. We're just seeing them starting to drop off now back towards Kingston, but extending all the way through the GTA across the city, around towards Mississauga and Brampton, and then of course up towards the north of us. And then areas a little bit further towards the south are still into a watch, because we're watching this particular band that's going to be rotating around in that direction. So there it is, you can see here, kind of between Goderich and Caledon, we've got some of the heavier band there, but if we go in for a closer look here just at the GTA and what we're seeing, when we get into some of these deeper purples, that's the more significant snow coming down at a rate of 2 to 4 centimeters per hour, and the more it kind of sits in one area, the worse it obviously gets. So Pickering, it's been a difficult day there through eastern sections of the GTA, but this is coming around towards the city. We'll be seeing these kind of whiteout conditions. They won't last forever, but that'll be kind of carrying on for about an hour or more. And then by 7, you can see it rotating around, and that's why we may see those warnings get extended around into the areas which at this point are in a watch situation. Overnight tonight, still some of those fingers coming across the lake. The winds ease a little bit tomorrow morning, so they'll back off somewhat. London, you may still be affected. And then through the afternoon tomorrow, the winds start to ramp up a little bit again. Not as bad as today, but it's still going to bring back a few more snow squalls before we can get out of this, Dwight.
We'll check back with you in a bit, Colette.
Sounds good.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
The Hockey Hall of Fame added a new piece to its collection today. Fans can now go and see the stick that Zamboni driver turned goaltender David Ayres used last Saturday night when he came in as an emergency backstop. Greg Ross is live at the Hockey Hall of Fame tonight. Greg, it's one of the biggest hockey stories this season. Too bad our Leafs lost that game, and the Hall of Fame just had to have a piece of it.
They certainly did. In fact, there were representatives from the Hall of Fame that were at that game last Saturday night when Ayres played. And the second he stepped off the ice, they stopped him. They took that goal stick. They put it away for safekeeping until today, that is, when they were able to invite Ayres and his wife, Sarah, here to the Hall of Fame to help unveil this new exhibit.
It's a moment David Ayres had only dreamed of but never thought would become reality.
For me to have a small little piece of something that I've done in here is unbelievable.
The stick Ayres used last Saturday night while helping the Carolina Hurricanes beat the Leafs now lives at the Hockey Hall of Fame, and Ayres was there to welcome it to its new home.
This is the first time I've seen the stick since Saturday night, so to be able to put it in here is unreal.
He just got back to Toronto after a whirlwind trip to the U.S. that started in New York with a media tour.
Oh, ow! Oh, God, I pulled my hamstring. I don't think I can finish the monologue. Oh, no.
Don't worry, Steven, I got you! And ended in North Carolina, where Ayres was a special guest at a Hurricanes game.
I think I've just been, like you said, whisked around everywhere, and you don't get a chance to sit back and think about it.
Ayres' stick is now displayed prominently just inside the main entrance of the Hall of Fame.
Earlier on, we kind of figured out how we were going to place it so that it has the best viewing and it's not going to fall.
From now on, anyone who touches it should be wearing white gloves, even family members. Should we reach in and just touch it? I mean,
I don't know if we'd get in trouble for that.
No security here. There's nobody around. Why don't we just reach in?
I can't do it. It's like this is the shrine. You can't. Oh no, can't do it. Okay.
Just grab it and run. Go, go.
Watch. I'm so clumsy. I'm going to knock it down.
This glass is going to close. It's going to be sealed for the foreseeable future. Is there any way we can give the stick to David one last time? One last moment with the stick here. Now that is a piece of hockey history, David. Be careful with it.
Yes, yeah. This is probably the last time I'm ever going to hold a stick like this.
The gloves were a little different last time.
A lot bigger for sure. A little more awkward.
Still feel good though?
Yeah, this is great.
Remember that last save, the last seconds of the game? Do you remember holding that stick?
Right into the glove. Yeah, that was a good one.
I think we need to close the door and seal this up forever now.
We're going for it, eh?
Say goodbye, Dave.
Yeah, see ya.
I'm kind of getting used to these white gloves. I think I'm going to have to incorporate these into more of my stories. But talking to David today, he says this is the first time he's ever been to the Hall of Fame since it's moved here to Front Street. He said he did go to the Hockey Hall of Fame once when it was at the old location back on the CNE grounds, but he says he was too young to remember that trip with his family back then. I have a feeling, Dwight, he's never going to forget this trip to the Hall of Fame.
No, he will not. But you need to give the Hall of Fame back their gloves. Thank you, Greg.
I'm keeping them.
Another exhibit getting some extra attention today, Sidney Crosby's gloves and stick, a puck, a net, and a podium. Today is the 10th anniversary of the Golden Goal. Where were you a decade ago? More on that coming up later in the show. It's the first time we're hearing about a plan from the province to stop young people from vaping. Today, the government has announced new regulations limiting flavors and nicotine levels. As Lisa Shing explains, it's an announcement critics have wanted to hear for some time now.
We all want our children to enjoy bright and healthy futures.
Ontario's health minister unveiling the province's latest regulations on vaping.
One thing has become abundantly clear. We need to do more.
The legislation will only allow specialty stores that serve people 19 and older to sell flavored vape products, with the exception of menthol, mint, and tobacco, much like PEI and Nova Scotia, which is restricting even more flavors. Those specialty shops would also be the only ones allowed to sell products with high nicotine content. Today, however, Elliott didn't mention instituting a provincial tax, which provinces like Alberta and British Columbia have recently done.
Would be appropriate for the federal government to take the first step and develop a national scheme for a tax. If they choose not to, of course, we will proceed provincially.
These new regulations come after the province banned gas stations and convenience stores from advertising vape products, and amidst some criticism that the rules haven't been brought in fast enough, considering the number of teens who vape continues to rise. But organizations pushing for a provincial strategy are welcoming today's announcement.
That helps a lot to cut off access to flavored products for our kids. Is the fact that a tax was not announced today a critical omission? I personally don't think so.
For others, these rules don't go far enough.
We already have very restrictive laws when it comes to tobacco in Ontario. Add vaping to those laws.
Convenience stores think they're being targeted unfairly and deny their opposition to these rules have anything to do with their bottom line.
Over 80% of our sales in the channel are mango and the higher nicotine content. Because again, we're selling to adults. We're not selling to youth.
If passed, the new rules on flavors will kick in May 1st and the restriction on nicotine content by July 1st. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
When it comes to protecting teens against those vaping ads, we wanted to know what actual teens think. So Ali Chiasson went to Bloor Collegiate to talk to the target audience.
So we're trying to get a sense of what teens are thinking about this idea that the government is now stepping in to take vapes out of gas stations and convenience stores, making them harder for you to buy. What do you think about that?
They're going to change it, but we're always going to find a way to get some kind of vape.
Yeah,
Or like, I mean, a nicotine addiction is severe. Like if we'll find a way to get what we need. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, I think it's hopeless.
Is it still really popular at school?
Kinda, I'd say.
Yeah.
I feel like the popularity has gotten down.
I feel like people feel like they gain some sort of social status when they vape, and that just doesn't align with my views.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this generation's cigarettes. Like our parents smoked outside of school, right? So.
Yeah, maybe. I think some people may think it's less harmful to the human body, but
because it's like fruity and like, you know, not like a nicotine smoke taste.
Yeah.
First time I ever did it, I didn't know anything about it. And then, you know, as more things came out, I haven't really found a need to use it ever. Because it's not really the need, it's just like, it was more just like a social thing, like all my friends were vaping, so I tried it once or twice, but like, you know, it's not really important to me.
Maybe it's a fad. Maybe.
Possibly.
Okay. Thank you.
Still ahead, you may have hundreds of dollars of on-cash checks from the government. How you can find out after the break. But first, the tracks are clear of protests, so why isn't full service back for Via Rail?
Probably would have rather taken the train than the bus.
It is disappointing since a train trip is much more comfortable than the bus.
When Via says they could get commuter business back on track, coming up after the break. There are no breakthroughs, but nor has anyone stormed out of a meeting of the hereditary Wet'suwet'en Chiefs and Seniors Ministers meeting from BC and Ottawa. They met for a few hours late yesterday and began a full day of talks. Nathan Cullen was once the NDP MP representing the area. Now he's acting as an intermediary for the BC government.
We're not anywhere there yet, but we're certainly in the right direction. So I remain cautiously optimistic for what it is that we're trying to engage in. And I should say that none of this is obviously easy.
We've got lots of work to do.
That last voice, Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett, she and her BC counterpart are both talking and listening to the Chiefs' concerns. Cullen says, though the Chiefs' opposition to the Coastal GasLink pipeline project has sparked nationwide protests, these talks are about the Wet'suwet'en. The meeting is supposed to wrap up today because the Chiefs are attending a funeral this weekend. After weeks of canceled trains, Via Rail announcing tonight partial service on most of its routes out of Toronto will resume early next week. But that means many travelers are still facing a few more days of disruption. Philip Lishanek explains.
Yesterday, protesters attempted to block the rails with burning pallets on the tracks through the Tyendinaga Mohawk territory near Belleville. Yet trains continued to roll. But so far, it's just for freight and not people. Those traveling east this weekend are stuck with their second choice.
I probably would have rather taken the train than the bus. I would have taken the train just to be faster.
It is disappointing since a train trip is much more comfortable than the bus.
This traveler canceled her train ticket up to Ottawa.
And they don't know about the return trip, so I decided to cancel both ways and rebook on Greyhound.
And while the tracks are now cleared, Via Rail says train service between Toronto and Ottawa and Toronto and Montreal will still be canceled until at least the end of day Sunday. But it's not as simple as flicking a switch, with a large number of freight trains currently backlogged on the network. CN owns the tracks, so Via Rail needs to wait for their okay before resuming service. And that could take several days. Via now says Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal service should be fully restored by Tuesday. Philip Lishanek, CBC News, Toronto.
3 pedestrians were hurt after a 2-car crash this morning near Yonge and Sheppard. It happened just after 8 this morning. Both cars veered off the road. Police say one of them rolled over and struck a building, rupturing a gas line. 2 of the pedestrians who were hit suffered serious injuries but are expected to survive. The other person had minor injuries. And less than an hour earlier, a pedestrian was struck by a driver at the corner of King and Sherbourne. The man was taken to hospital with head injuries. Initially, it was thought he was exiting a streetcar at the time, but the TTC later said that was not the case. A TTC operator, though, witnessed the collision. If you're doing your taxes this month, you might find some extra cash on the Canada Revenue Agency website. It all started thanks to a post on Reddit and then this tweet from a Toronto Maple Leafs fan account. Twitter users very quickly discovered they were owed money from things like GST payments or unclaimed tax returns, some even claiming to finding more than $1,000. Even the CRA seemed just fine with it too. So you want to check checks for yourself? Find out how on our website, cbc.ca/Toronto. It is the most read article on cbcnews.ca right now, right across the country. And Colette, a couple of our co-workers checked.
Yes.
And found cash waiting for them.
There were some happy people in the newsroom today, that's right. It seems like free money. I mean, it's your money, but it kind of seems like free money when you're not expecting it. So yeah, check that one out. All right, check these out too. These are your weather headlines. Letting up overnight, these winds, yes, they'll eventually be backing off, but then it gets breezy again tomorrow afternoon. And until they let up, we've got these snow squalls we continue to deal with. So I'm going to get into that pretty deeply here in just a moment. But one more day of cool conditions, then the temperature rebounds, and then it'll start to really rise. And we get into the mild conditions next week, but it does mean that any precipitation that comes in will likely see some showers or at times a little bit of a mix. Where we're not seeing the gusts as strong, that's why there's no number here. They're not over 30 kilometers an hour, but plenty of areas where they're close to 50 kilometers an hour and driving those squalls then from Lake Huron right across and heading over towards the GTA. These are your current temperatures. Mount Forest at -10, but you factor the winds in that we're seeing, and not the gusts, just the sustained winds to make it feel like minus 12 or minus 16. A very cold overnight tonight. We still are looking at snow squall warnings, the most extensive, these areas you see here in pink. All of these areas we are talking about seeing these kinds of warnings. They are beginning to drop off a little bit further off into eastern Ontario, but we continue to have them through the GTA into the north. And these are snow squall watches here in areas where we're likely going to see this band coming around the Golden Horseshoe and pushing. Here it is here, where some of that heavier snow and these whiteout conditions, that's going to start sinking a little bit further south. So coming to your doorstep towards Hamilton and Burlington, this will be coming around in the next couple of hours here. For now, seeing some of these whiteout conditions, yes, pushing right into the city. Through the overnight, as the winds ease up a little bit, these are also going to vacillate back towards the London area. Then they'll drop off and get a little bit weaker. But even into Saturday, could still see a few areas being impacted because the northwesterly breeze picks up again into the afternoon. Sunday, we get a bit of cloud cover and some flurries early in the day, and then we should be seeing improving conditions. I do just want you to know, with some of these squalls, we could quickly pick up a couple of centimeters, so do anticipate that if you're heading out tonight, and be very, very cautious on those roadways as conditions change so quickly. A look at your overnight temperatures then, just know it feels like minus 18. Tomorrow, still running about 5 degrees below seasonal for these highs, but that is going to be changing. So by Sunday, we're talking about 2 degrees. Remember, I mentioned some morning flurries. Keep that in your plans. Just know about it. But Monday, 5 degrees, a few showers certainly possible. And then temperatures as we're stepping through next week and we're going towards midweek. Look at those readings. We go above seasonal by 5 degrees or more, Dwight.
A nice rebound. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
This weather update is brought to you by Fairmont Le Chateau Frontenac, the best location for your next spring break getaway in Quebec City.
In the U.S., there are a few key dates coming up for candidates chasing the Democratic nomination for president. Next week's Super Tuesday is a big one, but the South Carolina primary tomorrow is shaping up to be do or die, at least for former Vice President Joe Biden. Katie Simpson is at a Biden event.
Former Vice President Joe Biden is in desperate need of a breakthrough here in South Carolina. And there are hundreds of people expected for a rally today where he's really hoping he can galvanize support. So far, his performance in the Democratic nomination race has been quite sluggish, but he's been very publicly saying that he's hoping to have a breakthrough here. I'm joined now by Leo Fraser. You're here to support Joe Biden. Tell me why you're here today.
He brings to me a sense of civility and hopefully back to the political climate, all right? And I feel this nation need a calmness. We need a calmness effect. We need someone, a proven leader. And to me, he has demonstrated proven leadership in the past, working with President Obama.
Joe Biden has consistently led here in the polls in South Carolina. Why do you think he is so popular?
He's been the same person since I've been following politics. He's been consistent. He's demonstrated that a sense of trustworthiness. And that's what I think people are looking for, someone that they really feel like know them.
Are there any other candidates in the Democratic field that you feel that same sense of trust with?
Steyer, I feel, once again, he seems to be, I say, grounded in the values of people.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time today, Leo. And so Joe Biden's campaign has put a lot publicly in the South Carolina vote. And it's the last one. It's the last primary before the Super Tuesday contest, before 14 different states and one territory weigh in. If Joe Biden doesn't get a rebound here, it's going to be very difficult for him to point to any evidence of success so far in this campaign to demonstrate to voters that he is the person that can actually attract a broad coalition of voters to be the person to go on the ticket and try and take on Donald Trump in the fall. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Sumter, South Carolina.
After the break, denied the right to repair why appliance makers don't want you to get a quick fix.
The average lifespan is about 10 years for appliances.
Do you believe that? No. They don't last. They're not as good.
They don't last, no.
The CBC Marketplace investigation coming up next. Many of us have had appliances break down, and according to a new CBC Marketplace survey, many of us are unhappy with how manufacturers responded when things went wrong. In tonight's episode, David Common takes a deep dive into how long appliances are lasting.
You're shopping again.
This is the expense that I do not want to get to.
Mehul Dalakia is shopping for a fridge once again. His died after just 6 years, and he couldn't get the part to fix it anywhere.
It is bad.
Nearly 1 in 3 Canadians we surveyed say they've had an appliance break when it was less than 5 years old, though the association representing appliance makers sees things differently.
Our data shows, and it's been relatively unchanged over the past 2 decades, that the average lifespan is about 10 years for appliances.
Do you believe that? No. They don't last. They're not as good.
They don't last, no.
One big reason Canadians told us is how hard it is to find parts, even for relatively new machines. In Europe, it's a very different story.
And then over here?
Here, lifespan testing is underway, and by next year, laws will require manufacturers to make replacement parts readily available.
The list of spare parts, they have to be available for like 10 years. And then they are supposed to be delivered within 15 working days after a request.
These laws would give consumers more power to repair their appliances rather than buy new when they break. Consumer advocates like Nathan Proctor are fighting to bring that to North America.
If you want products that last longer, that are better for the environment, that cost less to maintain, you should want right to repair.
But the big brands are pushing back.
We are very concerned about the safety implications.
By not backing some form of right to repair, it seems like consumers are being forced to buy new.
Right, so we never want to deny anyone a choice.
David Common joins us now. So David, the big question is, why is it so difficult to get these things repaired? Is it just that they want us to buy a new one?
I think certainly people are left with that impression. A lot of advocates are saying, you know, this is really just trying to get consumers to say, forget it, I'm not going to replace this thing, I'll just buy new. And when you think about it, you look at what our survey said, most people, if you have like a $1,000 appliance, don't want to spend more than about $300. Let's say you had a fridge, for instance, to repair it. If the compressor goes or something like that, most people will say something like, I put so much money into this, I probably should just get a new one at this point. And perhaps that is the motivation behind the appliance manufacturers. You know, they say that these are very reliable. They continue to claim that appliances last 10 plus years and that lifespans haven't changed over the past 2 decades. I think some people might find that to be a preposterous claim, but that is what they say and what they say they have data for. This really is about getting those parts, the difficulty of getting those parts, and then of course the cost, Dwight, of getting those parts, sometimes really, really big.
Quickly, tell us a little more about this survey tonight.
Right, so one of the things we're going to look at is something you and I would do if we were to go and buy an appliance. We go talk to our family and friends about what'd you get, how reliable was it. So we've asked Canadians to tell us their top breakdown by brands. So in other words, we have the top 5 brand breakdowns. We'll be revealing that on tonight's broadcast.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
You can watch the full episode, The Right to Repair, tonight at 8 o'clock right here on CBC Television and anytime on CBC Gem.
Alex Milan.
Close the door.
You know him?
We found him in the gorge.
Are they sure it was a suicide?
You got a curious streak, huh?
That's a taste of the dark Canadian thriller Disappearance at Clifton Hill, now in theaters. There are all kinds of twists and turns in this one. There are even surprises in the casting. It's directed by Albert Shin, who gives audiences a very different take on Niagara Falls. Eli Glasner is here to tell us all about it. So, Eli, what's the mystery at the heart of the Disappearance at Clifton Hill?
So it starts with Abby. When Abby was just a young girl, but 7 years old, she was on a family vacation. I think we have some footage from the trailer. So there she is, young girl posing for a photo, but it's what she saw when she was just that young age. She actually saw what she thinks is this boy, you see, he's disfigured, being kidnapped. Now, she was just a little girl. No one knew exactly what to believe, but that experience stays with her. So now we catch up to modern day, and Abby is coming back to work at Niagara Falls. She's closing down her mother's hotel, but in the process of doing that, she discovers some clues. She can't help herself. So she starts investigating because it connects to what she witnessed all that time ago. Let's take a look as she starts talking about this with her sister.
Remember, I used to talk about the one-eyed boy? I remember you telling me a lot of things. I found a picture.
So there you go. So she's pulled into this conspiracy, all sorts of connections. There's a local pair of magicians. There's all those kind of classic Niagara Falls locations. But there you see a little hint of someone who's going to help uncover that. It's Walter the podcaster, played by the one, the only, David Cronenberg. Amazing director. He's done Scanners and Videodrome, but now he's playing a podcaster, and his first scene, he's getting out of the river. He's been in a scuba suit looking for, I don't know, buried treasure or clues or something. And here he is, very politely, introducing himself.
Well, you've come to the right guy. I'm sort of the town historian. You like podcasts?
Sure.
Yeah, it's called Over the Falls. A lot of history around these parts. An awful lot of history.
I just love the idea that the guy who reinvented the horror genre is playing this you like podcasts? Over the Falls. And Cronenberg, you couldn't cast that part. There's something about him. He's just such an interesting individual and very droll, dry delivery style. I want a spin-off series where he just plays a podcaster going from town to town, solving mysteries across Canada. I think it would be great. David, call me.
What can you tell us, though, about this director who convinced Cronenberg to actually play this role and play along?
All right, Toronto's own Albert Shin. And I think maybe it's a case of mutual respect because Shin's career is exploding. He's one of this new kind of vanguard of voices that are breaking through. Now, a few years ago, he made a great film called In Her Place. That was set in South Korea. And it was a Korean language film, also a thriller. But I think what's interesting is he's come back to Canada and he's shooting the falls, but this is Niagara Falls as you've never seen it. In fact, when he was making this movie, I think the tourist board was actually trying to push back because they didn't really love the side of this location that he was showing because, the music, the atmosphere, this is the seamy, shady side of things. And what's interesting is, this is a conspiracy. We don't know who to trust. And the multi-layered mystery, but that includes Abby herself because she has a bit of a history. And so as we're really trying to figure out what's what, and look at the tone, suddenly we're in this video of this magicians and it's 1980s and kind of retrolicious. So all sorts of flavors here. But in the end, we're not exactly sure who's telling the truth. Now that is a very brave choice by a director to kind of just throw us into this mystery and say, okay, figure out for yourself. But I think it's also a really interesting way to give you a sense of just the murkiness of this location. And so I love it for Tuppence Middleton as the lead, Cronenberg in the wetsuit, not a bad thing, and just the general atmosphere, 3.5 stars out of 5.
Did you say retrolicious?
Retrolicious,
Man,
yes.
You whet our appetite for this one. Thank you, Eli.
You're welcome.
This winter station art piece down at Woodbine Beach may be too popular for its own good. Noodle Feed was designed to have people explore, climb, and even jump on the long arms, but all that wear and tear caused the sailcloth and straw stuffing to break and leak out. It's been removed. The organizer admits it should have been kid tested before being placed on the beach, but don't worry, the remaining 3 pieces will be up until March 30th. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
What defines a city? It's the people. Torontonians are diverse, friendly, fanatical, and adventurous. We are the mirror to this amazing, shining city on the lake. Our Toronto is your Toronto.
Up with it again. He's on the ice with Iginla. Iginla scoping forward. Sidney Crosby, the golden goal. And Canada has once in a lifetime Olympic gold.
Red, white, and gold, baby. We're number 1. Woo! Sidney Crosby scored the goal in overtime. Storybook ending.
Still have my Team Canada hat and shirt from then. Sidney Crosby in overtime against Team USA. 5-hole for the win. Happened 10 years ago today. We're betting you know exactly where you were when it happened, who you were with when you saw it, and the golden goal by which all others are measured. So, how does Sid the Kid himself remember this magic moment?
I think just happiness, you know. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations, and, you know, I think as a kid growing up, you dream of scoring, you know, goals like that. Scoring a big goal at the Olympics like that is pretty neat, but given the fact that, you know, it was in Canada, I think, you know, you're not going to get too many opportunities or be fortunate enough to be in the Olympics when it happens to be in Canada. So in your home country like that, it's pretty special.
It was pretty special. I think I was at my Uncle Roy's house in the basement watching it there, and he's the big hockey fan in the family, so it was a very special moment.
OT, right?
Right? Oh, it was a beautiful game, beautiful game. All right, not so beautiful out there right now weather-wise.
No, it's not, and it's not necessarily going to last that long, but if you get into one of these snow squalls, visibility absolutely suddenly reduced to near zero, and we're talking about picking up a couple of centimeters in an hour, 2 to 4 centimeters in some cases, as these squalls are rotating through. So moving from the east end, coming through the city, and then pushing around towards Hamilton, Burlington over the next couple of hours, and then pushing on towards London, and it will back off in the overnight hours, although we'll still likely see a few flurries and a few squalls tomorrow, not as intense, however. So just check those conditions before you head out, and definitely take it easy, because it's just that things change so quickly when you get into one of these squalls. But you saw our temperatures tonight falling down to about -10 in terms of a cold air still in place, but we're going to rebound by the second half of the weekend.
All right, and then next week, warmer temps.
Woo! Yep.
That's it for our show tonight.
Mild
Thank
again.
you for joining us. Mike Wise has you covered at 11. Colette and I will see you back here on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody.